In the previous video I talked about the 1000 SAL, but there were many cars besides the W126. Basically, if you had tons of money and you wanted to look different, but a 911 or a Testarossa wasn't enough for you, the tuners of the 80s had the answer for you. It's amazing to see how far these guys went, just to look different from the others. If you thought that the rises of the 90s and the 2000s were crazy, you have been totally wrong. From 911s with 4 pop-up headlights and BMWs with useless air vents to convertible Quattros. Here are some of the craziest cars from the tuners of the 80s. BB or Buchmann was one of the biggest tuners of time, especially when it came to Porsche. BB was founded in 1974 by the brothers Rainer and Dieter Buchmann in Frankfurt. They were way ahead of their time, since the W126 wasn't presented yet, so most of the tuners didn't exist. The first car was a 911 Turbo, which was converted into a Targa top. This particular car was built for Polaroid, so the car was painted with the rainbow colors of Polaroid, colors that would appear in many BB cars in the future. Since Porsche didn't offer the Targa version of the 911, BB would be very successful. Also, a 924 and a 928 were presented, but these cars had minor changes and not had a Targa top. This was until 1979. When BB presented a 1928 Targa. In fact, this car was a T-top, since it had the T-bar, but anyway BB called it a Targa. Differently from the 911, the 928 had undergone major modification. The rear window was now behind the rear seats, differently from the stock version. The interior features the popular Recaro seats, which have a rainbow stripe. The weird thing about this car is that the Clarion stereo system was mounted in the T-bar, and not in the dash like most of the cars. BB would also build a convertible 928, but the 928 convertibles, together with the shooting brakes, were offered by many tuners of the time. But like the others, BB also started converting Mercedes, but they did in their own special way. One of their first Mercedes is this 600 Grosser, which was built for the King of Saudi Arabia. This is definitely one of the most radical conversions of the 80s. The exterior of the cars has changed completely, especially the nose. The only way that you can understand that this car is a Grosser is the roof, the rear and the interior. This last one was basically the same as a normal 600 Grosser. BB would also convert another W100, but this car had a more Rolls-Royce look. But not much is known about this car, besides the fact that it had W123 headlights. BB would also build some 1000 SALs, but like the previous W100, not much is known about these cars. The BB Magic Top Mercedes is one of their most known creations. This car was pretty advanced for the time, since it featured an electric retractable hardtop, something very innovative. Since we are talking about tech, BB was one of the most innovative tuners of time. BB was one of the first to use a remote control central locking system, infrared parking sensor, multifunctional steering wheel, and the first electronically controlled dashboard with a display function for all the elementary data of the car. But their most known creation is not a tuned car, but a car built from the ground up. This car is mostly known as the Isdera Imperator 108i, but originally this car was called the Mercedes CW311. The CW311 was introduced for the first time in 1978 and was the car that followed the same design language as the C111. The interesting thing about the CW311 is that it was built by a mix of parts from Mercedes and Porsche. For instance, the engine was a 6.3-liter Mercedes V8, tuned by AMG, so it produced 400 horsepower, had a top speed of 319 km per hour, and could accelerate from 0 to 100 in 4.8 seconds. On the other side, the steering wheel was from a 911 and the suspension from a 928. Also, the tachometer and the speedometer was from 911. Even the ignition switch was on the left side. Somehow BB and Eberhard Schulz convinced Mercedes to use their name and logo. So the CW11 is the only car that isn't built by Mercedes to carry on their badge. BB also tuned Volkswagens. The BB Volkswagens were fitted with new body kits and new interiors. These cars were pretty popular back then. Gemballa is one of those tuners that you love them or hate them. But if you wanted something to stand out from the crowd back then Gemballa was the right tuner for you. Gemballa was founded in 1981 by Uwe Gemballa, and they originally started modifying Volkswagen. But quickly they started modifying Porsches, and later on Mercedes, Ferraris, BMWs, Lamborghinis, etc. Gemballa was mostly known for the interiors and for the extreme body kits. Like the others, Uwe also modified W126s, and for sure his Mercs did stand out. This one is a good example. Not so much for the exterior, but mostly for the interior. This SAC has one of the wildest body kits, with the Testarossa inspired side skirts. Speaking of Testarossa, the Italian Redhead was one of the most popular cars of the 80s, and is a car that represents a whole decade. Even though Testarossa wasn't a very popular car among tuners. But there were some tuners that built some special version, one of which was Gemballa. This car was a one-off, and was built for a special order. The weird thing is that Gemballa used the Testarossa side skirts in basically every car, but they decided to remove those here, probably because they wanted the car to stand out from the others, a special style that Koenig would also use. Differently from the 1000 horsepower Koenig, the Gemballa Testarossa had a stock engine. Also, the car received a new front and rear bumper, a roof ring, new wheels, and had a new exhaust system with 6 pipes. The interior was fitted with Recaro seats and dressed on black leather. But something that stands out from this interior is the small CRT TV, which is directed to the driver, and this for a good reason. Gemballa was one of the first to use rear cameras and also one of the first to replace the side mirrors with cameras. Another famous Gemballa is this 635 SIM. The car was painted yellow top to bottom and had an extremely wide body kit, a rear wing and a crazy luxurious interior. This car originally was bought by a Saudi customer, but in 2003 the car was found in Iraq by the US Army in terrible condition. It's assumed that was the car of Uday Hussein, the son of Saddam Hussein. But the Gemballa became famous for their wild Porsche, so let's talk about them. The most famous was the Avalanche. The Avalanche is probably the most 80s car you could buy. Yeah, the Avalanche was more powerful than a stock 911 since it had a roof engine, but nothing special. The body kit was crazy for sure. Only 13 Avalanches were made, and all 13 came with a slant nose, but they had their own differences. Besides the normal slant nose, some Avalanches came with a special dam, which moved up and down depending on the speed of the car. But if you wanted to look, Gemballa also offered a version with 4 pop-up headlights. On the rear we also find an extremely giant wing, but another weirder wing is covered in the rear window. The interior were mostly white, nothing rear special, except the TV that was placed in the middle of the dashboard. But if you wanted true power, Gemballa had another car for you, a 570,000 Deutschmark car. This car was the Mirage. The Mirage had a similar body kit with Avalanche with some difference here and there, but the biggest difference was the power. The Mirage had again a roof engine, but this time was a 500 horsepower one. Because of the high asking price, only one Mirage was ever made. Gemballa also offered a convertible car called the Sirius. DP Motorsport was another Porsche tuner. DP created a name by building bodies for Kramer and Jose Teams, but they started building street legal cars. They had a wide range of cars, but their most known creation is the DP 1935. This car was based on a 930, but had received the look of a 935 race car. But DP wasn't just an expensive racer tuner. The DP cars were true performers. The DP 1935 usually had 400 horsepower, 100 plus compared to the regular 930, but they were also 935s with 360 horsepower. Body kits were wild, and very similar with a Porsche 1935. DP offered two options, one with pop-up headlights and one without them, but some cars had both pop-up and bumper headlights. DP also offered a 928 version. These 1928s had some of the wildest body kits of the time. Originally, these 1928s came with pop-up headlights, but later DP replaced them with some air vents. DP also was the first tuner to convert the Porsche 1962 into a road car. No matter what you think, most of these cars were considered beauties back then, but one car was criticized since then. This was a A23 built by a Belgian tuner called Stenson. The exterior was quite normal, with some minor changes here and there. The interesting part is the interior of this car. White leather is everywhere, except for the wooden and the metal parts. All wood parts are now covered with snake skin, and all metal parts are gold plated. This was the ultimate Pipmobile. Audi wasn't a very popular car back then, so not many tuners work with them. But if you wanted an Audi, Treser was the right tuner. With a wide range of cars, Treser was specialized in Audis. Treser was one of the most influential tuners of the 80s. Their cars didn't just influence other tuners but Audi themselves. Treser Hunter is one of their best creations. The Hunter was based on Audi 90 and in a sort of way is the predecessor of the Allroad. The car was now raised up and had received a new body kit including a set of guards in front and back. Also in back it had a spare wheel. The Hunter also had an upgraded suspension, brakes and hubs. If you wanted something more luxurious, something on the terms of a W126, Treser had the 200 Largo for you. This car had the same length as a 500 SAL, but Treser was more conservative when it came to the interior of the car. Yes, it had a TV, phone, electrically operated seats, but nothing crazy as the other tuners. But definitely Treser's most known creation is the Quattro Roadster. The Roadster was presented in 1983 and had a hardtop, which was a little bit different compared to the others. Originally the roof was manually operated, but later on was hydraulically operated. Since the roof was one piece of fiberglass needed space, so the Quattro lost the rear seats. This gave the car a completely new look. The Roadster didn't lose anything in terms of performance. In fact, Treser also offered a 250 horsepower engine option. Then there was one of the biggest tuners and also one of the oldest Euro tuners. The interesting thing is that their catalog included basically every car: Volkswagen Golf, Scirocco, Renault, Opel, Alfa Romeo, etc. Besides Porsches and Ferraris, they also were famous for their body kits for BMWs and Mercedes. Differently from the others, their body kits were more simple. That's the number one reason why their cars don't look outdated. Gullwing doors were very popular back in the 80s. Beside SACs, even SALs were fitted with them. But the most interesting gullwing of the 80s is definitely the Boscheret 300. These cars were based on a 300 CA and had undergone major changes to make the gullwing doors a reality. If you see the car side by side, the changes are obvious. Also, the 300 had received the nose of the R129, which made the car even cooler. Some sources say that these cars were twin-turbo, but I'm not sure. Sadly, because of the high asking price, not many cars were actually built, and most of them were built without the gullwing doors, so it was just a W124 with a SAL nose. Arden was a German tuner specialized on Jaguars and Daimlers. They were more focused on the power of cars and crazy body kits, but they also offered exterior and interior upgrades. The first car that they offered was the Arden AJ1, a tuned Jaguar XJ. This car were more about the look since the car had only 16 horsepower more compared to the regular version. But later on they presented a 6-liter V12 option with 455 horsepower and a new 5-speed manual gearbox, which replaced the 3-speed automatic one. This option was also available for the Daimler 66. Arden also offered a new body kit, new rims and interior upgrades. Also, a XJS Arden version was presented. Besides the typical Arden changes, the XJS had received a new look, since Arden had completely redesigned the C-pillar of the car. These pictures show the difference between a normal XJS and an Arden XJS, and the Arden version looks better in my opinion since it looks more sporty. They also were some Rolls and Bentley tuners, but their conversion were more simple compared to the others. Most of the time were limo conversion. But the convertible Rolls made by the Italian coach builder Salvatore Diamante is probably the craziest one. This car was a special order by a Middle East customer, and more than one car was built. The interesting thing about this particular yellow convertible Rolls is that it has a Bentley grille and bench on the front, and the Rolls logo in the rear. But the most popular British car was definitely the Range Rover. Since it was the only luxury USV on the market, many tuners and buyers wanted this car. But like with the W126, some true weird creations were made. The 6-wheeler Range Rovers were very popular in the 80s, and basically everyone who tuned the Range built a certain 6-wheeler version. Different types of 6-wheelers were made, and most of them had just rear space and a more luxurious interior. The most interesting 6-wheeler ranges are the hunting version, like for example this particular version, which also was a convertible, and is equipped with hydraulic seats. One of the most ridiculous 6-wheelers is this one, which was not just longer than a regular Range but also wider. Convertible Ranges were also popular, especially the 2-door version, but also 4 doors were quite popular. Another distinctive feature of not just 6-wheelers is the new nose. Many tuners used a different nose compared to the regular Range front end. Some even came with a Rolls-Royce grille, like this one. Also some were fitted with a W123 nose. Plus these cars had a new American V8 engine. If you wanted to completely stand out from the Range Rover crowd, the answer for you was Glenford Face It. This car had a completely new fiberglass body.